Yes, I would like the applicant to come up. And these were originally scheduled 2 weeks ago, and I know questions arose regarding why the request for the extension is being asked 2 years before the application actually expires, and I just wanted to hear from the applicant. Would you like to state your name for the record?
Sure. Suzanne Elledge, representing the applicant. And it was frankly unclear to us whether the automatic extension should come at the beginning or the end of, what the total life allowed by the city would be. So we filed the application for the time extension request, asking for the maximum amount of time, just given the extraordinary state of the economy at this point. So that was our desire. The applicant clearly wants to proceed with the project and will do so when the market conditions indicate that it's a wise thing to do. So really, our goal was to just extend the life for the maximum amount of time possible. And it's clear from reading the Assembly bills, and the Senate bill, actually, the Assembly and the Senate bills that were passed over the last couple of years, that the state wanted to give applicants throughout the state the opportunity to have extended lives on their maps beyond what the local jurisdictions would provide. So in addition to what the state allowed in the way of time extensions, we also were seeking to get the maximum amount of time that the city would provide under its ordinance. So that's the goal. It was to be cost efficient, apply once, and get it for the maximum amount of time. So that's the objective of our application.
Okay. And I understand all that. My concern is that with all the changes that are proposed within the city, with since this map's been approved, the inclusionary housing ordinance has gone to effect. We're in the process of the general plan update, and public hearings on that hasn't occurred yet. There's been the draft documents out, and it's talking about densities. There's a number of implementation strategies. Condo conversions has always been a topic of discussion. The Planning Commission and the City Council have both stated that they want to look at our ordinance. I know when at least two of these projects were originally discussed at Planning Commission, the whole condo conversion, the loss of residential or rental units was discussed in that concern. So my concern in granting this extension and allowing it would be a total of 8 years from the original approval, that a lot of things can change during that time period. And so I feel it's a little premature to be asking for the time extension at this time. Not saying I couldn't support one in 2 years, but I just, at this point in time, I think it's premature and don't believe I can support the request.
Okay. Let me just make one comment. I understand your concerns. We do have an approved project, and it is consistent with the policies that are in place now. But I grant you that there's certainly a lot of discussion happening. We don't know where all of that's going to lead or when the changes might be adopted. But I do think that something beyond what the city would give in any situation, which is 1 year, that's the minimum amount that the city can grant under a time extension request, that something more than that would be appropriate in a time when we've got the most extraordinary economic situation that any of us have ever seen. So perhaps a 2-year extension would be appropriate, if not a 3, which it doesn't sound like you're willing to do. I guess I'm asking for a compromise.
I think my compromise would be an additional year. So that would give you 3 years, 3 more years. And that would not negate your ability at that time, if the situation was not, if the economy was not to turn around, to come back and ask for another 2 years. I just believe that the local condition with the general plan update, and like I said, the inclusionary housing ordinance has been adopted, and if this were to go through right now, it would be subject to that. So there's already changes that have occurred. I just can't support the full 3 years. So I would be open, and if that's fine with you, is a year. I mean, either deny it without prejudice, and it is appealable to the City Council. It goes right to the City Council. You can appeal within 15 days, or I could grant you the 1 year extension today and come back possibly in 3 years, or hopefully the map would be done by then.
Right. Well, as long as I'm not precluded from requesting a time extension in the future, then we'll accept that if you can't give us 2.
Okay, sure.
All right.
All right, so then in regards to the consent calendar, items A, B, and C, I approve a 1-year time extension for the 3 projects. I actually should probably read the address. It's 814 and 816 West Figueroa, 1916 Chino Street, and 515 East Arriaga Street. And so, like I said, it is appealable to the City Council. Actually, it's just the denial would be appealable to the City Council.
Yeah, no one can
approval,
no
yeah,
one
approval of
appeals
it
the
is
time
not, yeah,
extension.
so.
And were those the correct addresses? That first one, I just wanted to make sure that was the correct address.
Well, I can read it from the staff report. That's what's listed in the agenda. 515 East Arriaga is item C.
Mm-hmm.
Item B is 1916 Chino. Yeah, and item A, it says 814 to...
Yeah, that's right,
816
West
West
Figueroa.
Figueroa.
Okay, that's it.
All right, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly, for coming. And the next item on the agenda is 333 Piedmont Road. Roxanne, if you'd like to come up to the table.
Hello.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
That's not on either.
Yeah.
Okay.
that's on.
So-
It's my set only because I have it marked out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ready?
Yep.
Yes. Anytime.
Project site, just under 21,000 square feet, has frontage on Piedmont Road as well as on Terre. Current development on site consists of a 2,000 square foot single-family residence, an attached 2-car garage, and a pool cabana located in this area that is attached to the garage. As a part of a major remodel underway by new property owners, they are asking to remove the roof of the cabana, which is currently flat, and replace it with a hip roof that'll connect into the garage's roof in an architecturally appropriate improvement. Because the property is the development on site is currently non-conforming to the front yard setback off of Piedmont Road, a modification is required for the alteration in the portion here shown in orange. Purpose and intent of the front yard setback is to keep new development set back a fair distance off the street. It's staff's position that this development already exists. This is simply an alteration. The hip roof will result in the walls of the cabana being raised about 1 foot
Yes.
in order to make an architectural connection that works. Staff feels that no additional floor area is being added. Therefore, this alteration to the existing structure meets the purpose and intent of the ordinance by not allowing new development within that front yard setback, and is asking for support of this project as it's designed. Any possible approval by the staff hearing officer, though, does need to address 2 things. An existing storage shed here, which is shown to be relocated here, would still be located within the front yard setback. I'll work with the applicant finding an appropriate location. Also, the existing 6-foot-high stone wall located along this street frontage has been there for a number of years. In fact, I remembered it from a modification that I processed, when was that? In like 20 years ago.
Oh, really?
However, the modification was withdrawn. It was actually noticed for a modification agenda in January of 2002, but a closer record check showed that the application was actually pulled. So the approval never happened, yet the wall showed up on construction plans that were stamped and printed and showed the 8-foot-high wall located, or the 6-foot-high wall located here. So we do need to resolve this issue as a part of any approval relating to the roof change on the cabana.
And by resolving this issue, either reduce it to the height or apply for another mod for it? Because it wasn't noticed as part of...
That is correct. It would either need to have to be reduced, relocated, or legalized through an as-built process requiring modification approval.
Okay.
Okay, great, thank you. If you'd like to state your name for the record and add any additional comments?
John Rufo, on behalf of Jim McCary, the architect. The street view would just be more a cohesive appearance, and all the materials would be matching existing, and just raising the roof up 1 foot just to match the existing style of the residence is the basis of the whole mod.
Okay. Have you discussed this with any of your neighbors? Have you...
I believe they've been noticed, haven't they?
They have been noticed. I've had no contact with any neighbor, either in support or opposition.
Okay, all right. I would like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to address the staff hearing officer on 333 Piedmont Road? We did receive a letter from Ms. Paula Westbury expressing concerns with the project. And with that, I'll close the public hearing. I went out to the site and drove around the neighborhood and looked at it, and I think it is an appropriate improvement. It does enhance the streetscape, changing the roof height. And the reason why I asked about the neighbors, if you had any discussion with them, was just that's the only potential. The potential impact's not the right word, but since you are raising the roof, was there any discussion with any neighbors? Did they express concerns or anything? But in terms of zoning, you're not increasing the floor area in the setback, and it represents an architectural upgrade. And so I make the findings outlined in the staff report and approve your project. And I would put those two conditions on the project, that the storage be removed, either removed from the site or relocated to a place that conforms with the zoning requirements. So that would be the front setbacks, not the front yard, open yard, and like Roxanne said, she can come.
I believe that's part of the enforcement, isn't it?
Correct. And the plans indicated it was going to be relocated to here.
Yeah.
This location won't work because this becomes the front yard as well.
Okay.
All right, so then, and then with the 6 foot high stone wall to be
either removed or lowered.
Yeah. Yeah. Either that or that it be found the existing wall should be made to be in compliance with section 2887 and 160. Is that it? So that would be either lowering it, or you do have the ability to ask for a modification, or if you moved it back 10 feet from your front property line, it could go up to 8 feet within the setback. So if you wanted to move it back, you wouldn't need to get a modification to have it go higher.
Okay.
So just generic that this wall must comply with section 2887, and it's 160, right, not 170. The fence is walls and screens.
Okay.
Which section that one is. All right. So my action is appealable to the city, or actually to Planning Commission within 10 calendar days. Okay. They also have oversight authority of all my actions, and if they felt this warranted additional discussion before them, they could call it up. But I wouldn't foresee that with the roof change. But if either of those were to happen, Ms. Milazzo would contact you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have some replacements, I guess. Jim wanted me to switch these out.
Why don't you leave those with me?
Okay.
And I'll return the ones that I don't need.
Okay, the next item is 27 Rubio Road. If the applicant would like to come up. Morning.
Shoot. Yeah. There you go. No, I'll take it. That's fine. Thank you. Thank you.
Here's the photos.
Okay, this project site on a 7,300 square foot lot located up on the Riviera is currently developed with single-family residence here and a one-car garage accessed directly off of Rubio Road. When the current owners purchased the property recently, the zoning report identified several zoning and building violations that they're in the process of correcting. All those violations have permits for abatement. There's one final item. a deck that was previously existing was identified to be illegal. Current property owners would like to demolish this deck, which is in need of replacement, and would like to replace it in a very similar location, which accommodates most of the front yard and almost entirely up to the front yard setback. When one is at the site, that isn't apparent because the edge of the paving is down here. However, this additional, like 20 feet, is public right-of-way. The deck here would allow for the property owners to really utilize the ocean and city views that the property provides. The backyard, although it's adequate in size, does not allow you the benefit of enjoying the views. This application is for modification to allow the new encroachment within the front yard setback. Staff feels that the amount of encroachment being requested is excessive for the site. And although we know it's been there, it hasn't had an apparent impact on the neighbors because I've received no input or concerns with the notice that we've sent out. We are asking the applicant to maybe consider either making it smaller, so to provide more of a setback, or possibly lowering it. It hovers up above the street, and although the Single-Family Design Board is asking for a little bit more work on the design of it, staff wants to encourage that, again, it either be lowered to a lower point. I don't know how much you could lower it and still take advantage of the views, or possibly consider reduction of its size to provide more of a front yard setback.
Okay.
All right, great, thank you. I don't think I have any questions at this time. If you'd like to state your name for the record. And
My name is
add-
Don Gregg, representing Linda Rima, the owner. Okay, a couple issues on that. I think Roxanne did it's pretty self-explanatory that we've got this right-of-way by the city. Again, here's the street. We are actually proposing to take the deck that you see now, we're proposing to reduce it. We're taking it back 2 foot. We originally went to the Single-Family Design Board and received approval for that, not understanding where the setback was. It wasn't until we were well through plan check and building and safety at the last plan check that this kind of came up. So we thought we had done our due diligence and then found out, oops, there's a setback, but it was supportable by that to pull it back. So we took it out of that proposal, and then we came back and have addressed it. But we are reducing it back in the spirit of what the setback is. The setback is 30 foot unless you have a sufficient slope on the front of the property, in which you do, that pulls it back to 25 feet. So what we were this is where this deck sits now. We're proposing to pull it back so it is in keeping with the setback or the intent of the setback to that. We also are going back to we went back to single family again and said, look, we didn't realize when you gave us approval that there was this. Would you give us comments again to see if this is something you still would support? And they do support it. They do want us to come back and soften the look a bit, and instead of having this, because remember, this will pull back. So if you look at, they'd like to see us put some stone walls, which are keeping with other houses in that neighborhood. So we do, it's not that we want to keep the existing because it does really tower above. We do want to reduce the size. We did take a look at lowering it. When you do lower it, you kind of look into the roof line of the other house. I got off a little bit off of there. When you take a look at the street, because I know I only have 5 minutes, when you take a look at the street, this is across the street, you can see that the precedent's been set for the houses being very close in the structures to the street. So it's very consistent. On the neighbors next door, so this would be our property, this would be the neighbors next door, their deck sits in the same location that we're proposing out near the street. But they actually got the deck permitted when it was available to be permitted. Unfortunately, the people that owned the house before we did just built the deck and didn't get it permitted. So we feel by pulling it back, even with those other houses in the neighborhood, and doing some of the things that the Single-Family Design Board does to make it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, would be appropriate for that neighborhood. One of the other points that I think I could make is Roxanne does point out it really is the only place in the property that you can take advantage of the view, and that's why they bought the house. And they thought that they had done the proper, exploratory things with the city until we found this out. That it is really the only place that you can take advantage of it. But one of the benefits of the deck there, if you look down the street just to give you a reference, I'm in front of this house here. So when you look by, you don't even see that deck sitting out, and this is our property behind there. So we're even going to reduce it further. But when you come down and you come across the street, you're looking into this house. With the deck there, it provides some privacy. So you're not looking in and out of the windows. When you reduce that deck, this house and our house looks into one another. So it actually creates more of a privacy issue. We've got letters of support from the neighbors, this neighbor and also this neighbor. We've got verbal support from everybody on the street. We've taken it and talked to everybody on the street, but we've actually had 2 people, I think, write letters to single family that support the deck as it stands. The other issue that I think that the benefit of this is one of the major benefits of having the decks is it is the best place on the property to enjoy the beautiful views, but it also provides those views without having to build a second-story deck. We do, you would have the ability to do a second story, but I think it would change the charm of the house, the size of the house, and of the neighborhood. And to have the privacy issues of a looming second-story deck over there, I think this is much more appropriate because it is 25 feet back from the road, and even with the deck, it's probably the furthest back setting property on the street.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to address the staff hearing officer on 27 Rubio Road? No? And I believe you got a copy of a letter from Ms. Paula Westbury, Special Concerns? Okay, so I'll close the public hearing. I went out to the site and I've read the staff report, and I don't have information regarding the layout of existing properties around here. It actually is an application requirement that the adjacent neighbors be on the site plan. So visually from the street, not knowing where the property line is or anything, this does protrude out farther than all the other houses on the street. A lot of their decks that are...
the current deck, it does,
yeah.
Correct. And that's why we're proposing to pull it back.
Okay, so the houses along the street, a lot of them have this type of situation where there's maybe a 4 to 5 foot deck out, or a porch area maybe out over in front of their house. But the other part that does set this house out from other houses is in those instances, like in this one that you pointed out, the face of the house is flush. So with your deck just coming out here, I'm not sure if it's high enough to... You probably see the ridge line of your garage, right?
It's underneath. Just find the picture here.
This picture.
Yeah.
So, it would be underneath. So
Yeah, it's
up at this
underneath.
area. But when you look, here's your neighbor right next door. It's a one-story house. It has a little deck up here.
But that deck doesn't go out any further than his house.
Right.
It would not in the new proposed deck. It would be even with that.
Okay, but yours does go out farther than your garage.
It does now, yes. We'll pull it back. And we would pull it back to the garage.
Well, this is the outline of your proposed deck, right?
Correct.
And
And that's
so
because
this
it's at what we consider to be the intent of the setback.
Okay.
I mean, they bought the house for the deck. If you're saying it can't come past the house now, we would accept that.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm just
But that
looking,
would
trying...
probably pull off, if you've seen it, that if we made it even with the house, that would probably pull it back, 4 to 6 feet from where it is now.
Okay, I'm looking at, my findings that I need to make, that it's consistent with the purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance and necessary to secure and appropriate improvement on the lot. Appropriate improvement on a lot in this type of situation is, it is elevated. Outside amenities are appropriate. In your situation, you're trying to capture views. A deck could be seen appropriate. So, the improvement could be seen appropriate. It's just then the intent of providing a front yard, the separation from the street. It's a public setting. It is private property, but it's more of the visual scape. So that's where I'm getting at with what is on the existing situation of the street. And on this street, as with the majority of the properties on the Riviera, the upslope side of the street is developed different than the downslope because it's oriented towards the views. So, these properties on the downslope side are closer to the street. It's sloped, and if you go on the other side, I'm sure there's decks capturing the view. So, I understand your rationale in providing, that this provides justification, but it's two different sides of the street.
And that's why I tried to break them up to make that point. But even the ones on this side of the street, some of them get fairly close. But what we're trying to, the point is it's the intent of, if this right-of-way didn't exist, it would have been approved. It had been approved. But because this public right-of-way, that, by the way, if we walked out to the counter right now, half the time they can't even find that it exists. And they're never going to build a sidewalk there. The owner would actually put a sidewalk in. They would be happy with that. So it does meet the intent of the zoning, but there's just this right-of-way that does exist. They're willing to give to give up. They don't want to argue over a foot or two to get it back even with the house. But that's the reason that they bought the house and thought that they had done the proper due diligence on that. And they have. It is important to note, too, that in the zoning report, there was a lot of things from the previous owner, and they've mitigated every single one of those issues. And I still think even this deck here is much more in keeping with the neighborhood and friendlier to the neighborhood than a bigger, the same size deck up on a second story that looms down over everybody.
Well, that again would have to be set back the 30 foot.
But you could make a second story. So instead of having this very cute, and these are still the old pictures, but the newer remodeled house where we did a very small addition in the back to keep it a one story is much cuter than having a big looming second story, type element that would be within the setback.
Now, with staff's recommendation about reducing the size 100 to 200 square feet, was there any particular distance or just the area? Because reducing it by 100 or 200, could do this kind of thing, or was it to pull it back from the street, or was just...
I believe the direction I was given was to recommend that it be pulled back further from the street.
Because it's
Or
kind of a
lower.
natural the way it goes
Right.
with the sidewalk and the existing walls that are there. It makes sense, but we could have it would be very easy to have another planter bed, pull it back to here, and from that rock wall have another planter bed that would even soften it further, but I don't think it would really do much.
Well, the face of the house is what, 9?
The face of the
It's
garage.
an 8.
Yeah.
I think that we could pull it back to the face of that garage for sure, and then it is pulled back even with everything.
Well, I was thinking more of having a 15-foot setback, which would be a 10-foot encroachment, which would be about a little more than half the garage.
Again, it does, when you do shorten it too much, you do get in a situation, because of the slope looking down, when you shorten it too much, these windows are looking into the neighbor's windows. So the neighbors across the street actually support keeping it because, of that slope. So if you're looking, you can kind of see back here is the deck, and you look down onto this house here, kind of goes like that. And so if that deck
Screen the camera.
if that deck disappears,
But they
they're-
have a structure here.
Probably to give themselves some privacy.
some privacy. It really becomes, when you go stand and look, that deck's not there, it really looms in that if you do block that deck too much.
Well, the other
Because
option would be cut it back more.
the elderly lady, I believe, that lives there, I think was there before they built that deck, and I think they like that deck because it provides privacy, where normally a deck doesn't, and I understand, doesn't provide privacy. It does provide privacy.
Yeah, but then if you pulled it back here, you're not so close to the property. I think there's trade-offs in either way.
Yeah, because remember, the pictures you're looking at, the deck goes to here now.
Yeah, well, I'm just still looking at my findings that I need to
Okay.
make and how to justify having the deck take up such a large area of your front yard. Whereas it's not, this extent of a deck is not consistent with the other development on the street, which is one way you can make a finding.
Right, even though they do have a deck, it's longer, but it's similar size. But it sticks
narrower.
out. It's narrow, but it does stick out about the same distance.
And that is, okay, here's the aerial
So you'd say the one to the left.
So it'd be this house. So that deck comes out, and it's about to the front of the garage. I mean, I
Well, because here's the house,
Yeah, and
here's
then
the
they have
house,
the
and
deck,
then here's
right.
your garage. So it's, the 10 foot is a little bit back from the face of the garage. The most is I can do is 10 foot,
okay.
8,
So you're saying it'd be about right.
wherever it is.
Right, wherever it is, but off your scale, it's setting back just slightly here.
Yeah,
Okay.
so 10 foot.
Roughly, what does that give us from here on your scale?
Well, if the whole thing is 21 to the inside, or
Yeah,
22
okay.
to the inside.
I mean, that still gives them a sizable deck.
So that'd be about 18 and a half maybe, 17.
Okay.
All right. And you weren't proposing, Roxanne, any, okay, just that one reduced by 100. Okay, so with the acceptance of the reduction of the deck, I could make the findings outlined in the staff report and approve the project with the condition that the deck be set back a minimum of 10 feet from the front property line.
Okay.
And the idea is that it's, I know there has to be some transition, it's not going to, but it's not like to go like this now.
No, it's going to stay on the.
Yeah.
It doesn't make because it's already there. It would not make any sense.
Yeah,
to do
so
that
the
anyway.
idea is, and there, I know there's
Not to
some
increase
nice,
it on the side.
Yes.
To pull it back in the front and not increase it on the side.
Correct,
Okay.
yeah, so then reduce that much. All right, so then I approve your project
Okay.
with that condition, and my action is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days, and like I think you heard me say on the project beforehand that they have the oversight authority over all my projects, and if they feel that this was something that warranted additional discussion before them, they have the ability to call that up, and that's the same 10-day calendar, appeal calendar. And if either of those instances were to occur, Roxanne would contact you.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we keep all these photos
Yeah.
that you took?
Thank you.
Great. Okay, the next item is 401 and a half.
No, Chapala should go first.
Oh, do you want, you're the applicant for both of them, right?
Yes.
Do you want Chapala to go first or Old Coast Highway?
Well, should probably go first, yeah. Nothing about-
All right, so then for people who,
It's on the agenda first.
oh no, huh? For people who are watching it at home, we're going to skip over item C, which is 401 Old Coast Highway, and we will, I will hear 2017 Chapala Street first, and then we will do 401 Old Coast Highway. Good morning. Anytime you're ready.
Yeah, thank you. This project site, about 11,000 square feet, is located on Chapala Street. Current development on site consists of 2 commercial buildings, driveway coming down here. The proposed project is a change of use, but to maintaining commercial use for the front building, but changing the rear commercial use back to its original use as residential. Because the residential needs residential setbacks, there's a small portion of the building, about 2 feet along this length, that is located within the required 6-foot interior yard setback. So a modification is required to change the use of that portion of the building. The entire project will result in conforming parking being provided for the uses. The commercial, at about 1,500 square feet, requires 6 parking spaces that are being provided, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a disabled access parking space here in the front. The residential, which occupies less than half of the total development of a mixed-use development, only requires 1 parking space, and that 1 parking space is being created in a lower area below the residence. It's staff's position that minimal, if no, exterior changes are going to occur here, that the residential use is actually less intense than a commercial, and that the modification to allow change of use within that interior yard setback is necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on this lot and meets the purpose and intent of the ordinance. The property is zoned residential and commercial. It's a residential use. It's returning it to its original residential use. Again, there's only minor exterior changes and no intensity of use within that setback. Staff is asking for support of this project as it's proposed.
Now, the zoning on neighboring sites, it's all the same?
Correct.
And it does have the the C2 on it? It's not just R2, RO, it's RO.
This is probably C2.
Tiny little strip here of C2, I understand.
Yeah, that's
okay.
where the C2 is. It's just a very narrow strip
Okay.
applying to the properties it backs up on Delavina.
Okay. But in terms of this way, it's R2, RO.
That is correct.
And then the rear portion has the C2, and so that's...
Very small.
Okay. All right. Thank you. If you'd like to state your name for the record.
Gil Garcia, architect and applicant, representing the applicant, which is Dr. Rai, the dentist, that'll be in the front building.
Okay. Do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Really, I think staff covered it very well. I would only add that we are utilizing the existing building and upgrading the buildings up to current code and energy standards.
Okay.
Minor in the windows and minor modifications to the building.
Okay. I do actually, Roxanne, just clarification. In general, parking's not allowed in the front yard or in the front setback.
It is not in the setback.
Right, okay, and it's allowed in the remaining front yard, and the loading space does encroach into the remaining front yard, but that is, with our recent zoning amendments, that's allowed, so that's why they're not asking for a modification. Okay, just clarifying all that. All right. And then I have some other questions, but first I would like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here in the audience who would like to address the staff hearing officer on 2017 Chapala Street? No? We did receive a letter from Ms. Paula Westbury expressing concerns. Okay, great, thank you. I'll close the public hearing. Okay, so then I have some questions regarding... Oh, okay, you have it here. Okay, that was a question. Is what improvements are going to be occurring in the setbacks? I did go out to the site yesterday and I walked around the site, and I think your project's going to do a lot for the for the site. But I did notice an exterior stairway and a door coming in somewhere in this area, and I noticed the floor plan doesn't accommodate that. So that stairway.
That's being removed.
Okay.
And the door, and put in the window.
Okay, so you're decreasing activity in that setback.
Yes.
There by getting rid. Okay. And then one of these, it talks about a walkway. This tree is going to remain, right?
Yes.
Okay, so the walkway is just kind of showing like a dead space, or what?
Yes, this was a remnant that should actually have been eliminated when we felt that this tree was endangering the building. When we did a study, we found that actually it accommodated underneath it. Actually, it accommodated, and it was pressing against the building. That can be remedied by raising to the underside of the structure and give this some more growth room. So that we decided to leave this after the study, which then eliminated the walkway. So
Okay.
that's gone.
All right, that's a nice tree.
Yeah, it is a nice tree. We didn't, so we saved it.
I think those are fit. Roxanne covered a lot of the things I had in her presentation. Good job. All right, so like I said, I went out to the site and walked around the neighborhood, kind of got a feel what was next door. I realized this is an existing parking area, but I wanted to see what was on adjacent, what kind of uses. And I think in this instance, the changing of the use to the commercial back to the residential use, the modification can be supportable. There is a setback area between the building and the property line. You're actually removing some improvements on the exterior access, which causes people going in and out and activity in that area. You're placing it with a window, so I think that is a benefit to the the site. I have concerns with the parking space in the front, but that's not my purview. It's design review. So, and I realize we do encourage the reuse of existing buildings through allowing accessible improvements to encroach into setbacks, because that's one of the problems with reusing older buildings is how do you accommodate people with special needs getting in and out of the building. So, that's another trade-off.
I would just add that especially for a dentist and doctors, small dentist doctor's office, it's appropriate to get it close to the front door.
Yeah, to the main entrance. Yeah, I couldn't imagine parking here with a wheelchair and pushing it all the way back up to get in to the front. So your options are kind of limited. I was just visualizing, if you provided it behind the house, how would that work? But I think given the existing layout.
As long as, I would just say that, not to say that you want to have a handicapped patient, but to date he hasn't had one. So this would probably be, give the visual effect of a plaza for much of the time.
Is it
landscaping and
permeable? Oh, there's ribbon. Is the ribbon driving?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I can make the findings outlined in the staff report and approve your project. I don't need to add a condition to remove the stairway because it's not shown on your plan, so it is part of your project description. So with that, I approve your project, and my action is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days. They also have oversight authority of all my actions, and if they feel that this warrants additional discussion before then, they have the ability to call it up during that same 10-day period. And if that was to occur, Ms. Milazzo would contact you. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
I'll give you all my extra plans right now.
Thank you.
That one too. Okay, the next item is 401 Old Coast Highway. We switched the order. Oh, here's Chipole's. Thank you. Anytime you're ready.
Okay. This project site, a flag lot, is about 7,000 square feet, located on Old Coast where it meets Salinas Street. Access to the property is down this long driveway and is currently developed with 2 single-family residents and commercial space. The proposed project involves conversion of the commercial space to a residential unit for the 3rd residential unit on this site. Portions of the building are currently located within the required 10-foot setback, and a roof connection here to make the development on site into a triplex require modification approval for new construction or alterations within that required rear yard setback. As a part of the proposal, portions of the building currently located in this interior yard setback are being removed. Parking, open yard, and living areas are all being provided according to the current requirements for the code. The applicant's position is reuse of this existing footprint is appropriate for the 3rd unit in that the solid wall construction at the rear of the property line eliminates any impacts from the parking lot that exists behind the property. Staff has a slightly different position in that the floor plan configuration with no exterior lighting here, an opening and separation, which we believe the purpose and intent of a setback is to provide, is not being met, and therefore is asking for denial of the modification. We've had several opportunities to meet with the applicants and have recommended reducing portions of the building located in the rear yard, providing more residential type amenities. The applicant has chosen at this point just to remove out of this setback but convert the remainder of the building to residential as it exists. The floor plans are contained in the plans. You can take a look at that. Again, staff is asking for denial of this request as it's currently designed. The project has been before the Architectural Board of Review, who pretty much took that same position and denied the project unanimously without prejudice.
Okay, thank you. I have a question zoning related in regards to the 10% required open yard, or the 10%, that's not what it's called, but the outdoor living space where you do the individual private units, and then 10% of the lot needs to be open, and then you have that 15 by 15
Correct.
area. Okay. So this shaded area here, this all represents the 10% area, right?
That's correct.
Now, does the area under this attachment, does that count as open area? Because now if we're calling it attached, how can an area under it be?
And you can actually see there's some additional areas. The plans have been through so many revisions. I apologize for not making appropriate alterations. Staff has verified that all the required yard requirements are being met, so that those type of modifications have been eliminated from the project and can be met. The connection was a later alteration.
So, but answering my question, no, it does not count, but
Well,
it's offset over here.
It's offset,
Okay.
correct.
And then in terms of the roof connection, I don't know if I brought that section of the code. Our zoning ordinance requires main buildings to be separated by 15 feet unless they're one story, then it's 10 feet, right? Or do I have that backwards? Yeah, 1 foot. 10 story is 1 foot. And we don't have a definition of, the idea is main building, main building. I think what we're using is the provision with accessory buildings when we're talking about attached versus detached accessory buildings and whether it counts as 500 square feet maximum or whether it's just part of the building. So in that section of accessory buildings, we talk about an 8-foot common wall, no less than 100% of that 8-foot common wall, or connected by an 8-foot roof. And so it's my understanding, since we don't have a similar type of provision for main buildings, we've just used that. So my question regarding, and maybe I'm getting a little premature, but I was still doing questions to staff, is this doesn't look like a roof. It looks like just a connection, because here's the roof of this building and here's the roof of this building. So the connection part, I don't see that as being connected. You know, in this area, it's showing this view too. It's just like an area between the buildings, just kind of like an awning or a breezeway. And I guess, I don't know, Mr. Cotta, if you can add anything, but that was just a question. If you want to think about it, I can have the applicant present and then, okay.
And we have our zoning plans examiner here. We have reviewed the roof connection and determined that it is a roof connection and it meets the minimum dimensions of 8 feet. The applicant's intent was not to apply for an additional modification for building separation, and desiring to maintain the buildings as they exist, felt this was a remedy to connect the buildings with a roof element that would therefore constitute a triplex.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll let Danny think about that. I'll let the applicant do their presentation. And I have some other questions, but I think I'll listen to your presentation and then see what. Because a lot of times they're answered in the presentation.
All right.
So I'll.
Well, let me present. I'm Gil Garcia, architect on the project.
I'm
and,
Tony,
Fisher.
attorney for the applicant.
Okay.
First, I'll
Morning.
present the design and respond to some of the comments that staff comments.
Okay.
First of all, it is true that the original building does cover it's up against 2 setbacks, and the original idea was to reutilize the entire building, requiring another modification. We have been going through several iterations and have felt we have responded to the concerns. One of them, of course, is the setback, which was economically a big hit to the owner to do this, trying to keep this as an affordable housing complex and trying to minimize the expenses to continue the affordable housing Section 8 use. So we went ahead and bit the bullet and did that. We felt that the 3-bedroom configuration was important because that was one of the highest calls for in Section 8 housing was 3 bedrooms. And felt that if we kept this, because of the parking lot, as staff had mentioned, if we kept that against the wall there, we would provide lighting through a light shaft here that we could provide, holes through the wall. ABR didn't like the bars. We can remove the bars and put like a screen through the wall. That would provide a window into the center of this. The other amenities, of course, would be skylights that would make it very bright. There's a saying that the skylights really absorb a lot of light, much more than windows do. So we would get a lot of daylighting. They also can penetrate into the depth of the center of the building. So we felt it would be a very nice living condition for somebody to live here. But more than that, just for the person that would be here, thinking of just that person, the comment was that this was not up to new building standards by the ABR, and we agree. It's not up to new building standards, but I'm sorry, I disagree. I was going to agree. I understand their concern, but it is up to new building standards because this is very common to have a common wall like this separating other units, and you've seen it in Los Fuentes apartments, affordable apartments. You have common walls like this. I brought an example of a high-end condominium that I have the original, so I can make a copy and deliver them to you, where I actually have the same condition here of a common wall and a light shaft between them. So to me, it is part of new building standards that are currently being done. So I would disagree, strongly with ABR standards on that. But more important, that livability of this unit, I think it can be very well a very good living unit, very good experience of living here. But this is only one unit. We feel that this addition will then give us, improve the livability of these 2 units by providing the amenities they have never had. And to me, that's very important, to not only work for this unit, but also for this unit. Now, one thing that's not mentioned in the staff report, you have my letter, I think you read my letter, of all the reasons why I think it's a good unit. So I'll just add one thing that was not in the letter, and that is that ABR would like to return this back to commercial. Staff, I believe, has indicated that they feel that this should be residential, because commercial would require that I put 12 parking spaces back here. And 12 parking spaces back here is a historical approved historically approved as 12 back here, but it didn't work. So we would go back to a historical parking lot that didn't work. It didn't have the proper backup spaces, and yet we can probably get it because of historical. So that would be inappropriate to keep doing something that didn't work. The other thing that doesn't work is that this driveway is not wide enough for commercial. So that makes it difficult to return this back to commercial. But the biggest reason is that these 2 people would continue to have the very bad living conditions that we feel are we're trying to upgrade to if we continue in that direction. So now, as an aside, on the setback, 10-foot setback, I thought I saw a letter, and I don't have a copy of it here, that indicated that staff had agreed that this was to be considered an R4 condition. So the setback, I think, in R4 is 6 feet, but that's just an aside at this point.
Well, it's the fact, this is residentially zoned and this is commercial, so adjacent to a residential zone, it's 10 feet or half the height of the building.
I know, but the letter indicated that any development here would be considered R4. That's what the letter said from staff. So that's why I questioned the 10 feet. Okay?
That would be in terms of density.
Actually, that applies to R2CP zoned property. In this regard, it's a 6-foot setback. Here against the R2, it is 10.
Okay, but I maybe I misunderstood the letter then. If this was to be considered R4 rules, I was under the impression that would be against R2. It would be R4 C2 if it was considered R4 rules. That's what
It's been complicated.
Okay, yeah, no.
Okay.
Okay, great, thank you. you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes, let me first be sure, did you receive my letter dated yesterday?
Yes.
And all the attachments?
Yes.
Including the attachment that listed the history of the property. And the reason I bring that up is because there's another consideration here, and why, in addition to the fact that this design improves living conditions for the 2 units that are not in question, it's an overall improvement for everybody. The existing use of the property, as described in the staff report, suggests that there is a pending zoning violation or something akin to that, or an enforcement case, and as the documents I presented to you and in that summary indicate clearly, is that all of the enforcement matters that were subject to the hearing have been dismissed. It has always been our position that the existing use as 3 units is, plus a small commercial unit, as being a mixed-use project, conforms and could be continued to be used. And the owner said, okay, I put that in my back pocket, but I can maybe make things better for everyone, and so spent 8 months working with city staff to come up with a solution that would improve the circumstances for everyone, and has done that, and that is what is before you here, with the idea that you could make the findings for a modification because you are in fact improving the living circumstances for everyone there, making it a better housing circumstance than what is currently there, even though what is currently there is, as the documentation I submitted to you, is perfectly legal and could continue. And so the comment in the staff report about what is the current status of the property is apparently still based on the 2008 interpretations of the zoning ordinance and the various codes,
No, I
which have
think that-
since been rejected and set aside.
I think staff agrees that 3 units isn't allowed use on this site, but to able to add that 3rd unit and convert this to residential use, you need the modification. So I don't,
It's already converted. The existing use is residential and has been for 20, 30 years.
okay.
And so that was approved, as the documentation points out, in 1982, and has been in that status and used as residential for all of these years. I know the staff position, and I know we have had some disagreements about the staff position, but I'm quite confident that the staff is wrong when one looks at it, and I think the current situation being that we had an administrative hearing, and in that process, all of the alleged violations were dismissed. And that's final. That happened a year ago. Secondly, the staff report seems to suggest that it's inappropriate that this property is intended to be used as a triplex or 3 units because of some mistake made in writing the zoning ordinance sometime in the past. I don't know why that's being brought up in your staff report. It's an inappropriate influence on you, asserting to you that somehow there's something, that the property owner has an improper condition. The zoning as it exists was adopted by the city. If somebody made a mistake in writing the zoning ordinance, I don't necessarily accept that the city council would have made that mistake. I think it's a binding existing ordinance, and therefore it's inappropriate to come in and say 15 months after we brought
Okay.
a proper interpretation of the zoning ordinance to the attention of the city staff.
Excuse me, you have 5 minutes to do this, and my understanding is that 3 units are allowed on this property, okay?
All
And
right.
looking through the records, I see there's two residential units and 1 commercial unit. There's 3 on the site, and what's before me today is to change the use in the setbacks. And let's talk about the modification for changing the use
All
in
right.
the setback.
All right. Well, part of the justification for the modification is that it's improving the existing condition.
Okay.
And that the existing condition with partly commercial and the rest residential would have no setback requirement because it's mixed use. And it's existing. It's all legal non-conforming. Now, you say you've looked at the files. The reason I'm being insistent about this is we have attempted over the last year and a half to get into the street file the actual documentation from the building department regarding and the zoning regarding the status of the property into the street file so that persons like you could read it. We have been denied. They have refused to forward that documentation to the street file. And so when they say, based upon the file, they describe it, they're describing it based on a partial file. It's that the official street file has not been updated at all, except by picking and choosing inappropriate documents. And so when you said you've looked at the file and you're basing it on the staff position, I think you have the obligation to understand.
And let's just focus on the mod request, okay? I don't go into asserting things are missing from files or not. What I've looked at is the previous zoning information reports, the previous building permits, and I don't see evidence of them. That's something that you can work with staff on. What I'm looking at now is allowing residential use in the setback. And in regards to mixed-use standards, if this were built today as a mixed-use project, you would require the 10-foot setback here. But this is an existing building. You're changing.
It's not being built today, and
I
that
know,
zoning
but you're
ordinance
saying
change was
that-
in 2008, so this all predates all of that.
No, I know, but the setback here for a new mixed-use building on a CP lot, CPR2, adjacent to a residential use, requires a 10-foot setback.
Then it's legal non-conforming. It makes no difference.
Yeah, and now you're asking for a change of use in the setback.
We're asking to change from a partial commercial mixed use to an entirely residential, and in exchange for that, we have created a setback that doesn't exist currently, and so we have taken this space and made it setback in return for a small portion of the space here that's commercial being made residential, in large part because putting a commercial use in the middle of the residences doesn't make much sense at this location. It has not made sense for the last 30 years. It has been used residentially with a very small commercial component for all these years, for the simple reason commercial back there behind next to the residential does not make a lot of sense.
Okay.
This concept of the owner here is not trying to do anything other than end up with what the city wants is residential units, and he wants to make them better for the tenants than they would be to continue the current arrangement. And if there's no other reason for granting a modification, you have a flag lot, which makes it a very unique lot in this circumstance. You have somewhat unique zoning, R2CP, and with that combination, and because you have existing buildings, the current request is very minor in that it is, instead of continuing with using the building as it currently exists, he's willing to make changes that make improvements for everybody on the site. And if the city doesn't want that, we'd like to know why not.
Okay.
It's the only thing that makes sense is to end up having a better living circumstance, and he's giving up an existing commercial portion, which is a small portion that is, back here along the back wall. It has its own entrance. It's a separate commercial unit. But in addition to that, there are 3 residential units on the property and have been. many, many years. And they existed in 1982. And 80 is when they got approved. They were there when it was purchased in 1999.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's something that would be worked out outside of this arena, because the ZIR I saw in 1982 clearly said there was 2 residential
You have to
units.
remember that ZIRs have limited life. They have, they are not the official approval documents of the city. You have to look at the approvals and the permits.
Okay. All right.
As
Thank
opposed
you.
to looking at zoning reports, which by their own terms and conditions are good for only 1 year. And in this circumstance, we don't know what the people who did the zoning reports did regarding looking at the property to determine what was really inside.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to address the staff hearing officer on 401 Old Coast Highway? No? And we received a letter in opposition from Paula Westbury, and I think Mr. Garcia had received a copy.
In a, this be forwarded. This was an email I received yesterday from a neighboring property owner.
From Dale L. As a property owner on Ocean View, we request that the staff hearing officer decline any modification request for project MST 2009-00500 and Gazapian. We are concerned about increased traffic flow, noise levels, parking congestion, which comes with an increase in population density. We feel that it is important to follow the established zoning rules and especially setback requirements as specified in Santa Barbara Municipal Code 2854060. Compliance with zoning restrictions and regulations should apply to everyone. We agree with staff recommendation to deny the request for modification. Thank you for addressing our concerns.
And the person?
Perina Loudermilk.
And an address? Oh, thank you.
Okay, so I'll close the public hearing. Regarding the building connection question I had, Mr. Cotto.
Ms. Reardon, I just had a conversation with our zoning plans examiner, and she agrees that this is not a building connection. It's a breezeway. In order for that to be considered a connection, it would have to be the connection of the roof structures of the 2 buildings, and this is not that. I mean, somehow this roof structure would have to be connected to
This one up
the
here.
other side. This.
Because this
these
space
two
right
roofs,
here is
right.
this right here.
These 2 roof structures have to be connected, and this is not actually adequate. And she said that she had communicated that to the architect sometime previously, but this is what came back.
Okay. So in regards to my question, whether that does, and then in regards to the code, the section of the code that we're trying to use was meant to be used in regards to attached versus detached accessory structures, but since we don't define building connection anywhere else, we use that as
Yes, that's
the fallback?
correct. That's our long-standing practice for at least the 20 years that I've been here. That since that's, and there's a general practice in our city and maybe others that says that if there's no definition for the particular thing you're looking for, you look for an equivalent or a definition that's in the zoning ordinance, and if it's not in the zoning ordinance, then you would go to like Webster's, right, the regular dictionary, to figure out how you would define something. And in this case, you're right, there is no definition of or requirements for connections between main buildings, so we do use the connection between accessory building and main building as the governing regulations.
Then in regards to the outdoor living space, I've had this discussion on other projects, and I think I've discussed it at development review projects, so I think I've discussed it more with Mr. Cato. In regards to this new provision of the 15 by 15 common open yard area, which is the requirement of the R4 zone. And in an instance I'm thinking of, they were proposing it was a mixed-use building. They were proposing it in the front yard area. It was 15 this way, and I don't know, like 23 this way or 25. And it had the main walkway into the development through there. And I had concerns with allowing a main walkway in this common open area that was supposed to be used for on-site recreation, whether it's a barbecue area or it's a place for kids to throw ball. And so having this on-site, this walkway through there seemed to conflict with that purpose. And so I actually approved that modification, eliminating the walkway, finding it was appropriate that the total area still met the the area required by the 15 by 15. It just didn't meet the minimum dimension for that area. Now this plan shows the main walkway for the new unit going right through this area. It's 15 by 15. Do you have any comments on that? And I know the private outdoor area for Unit 2 is proposed in this area, and it's my understanding the historical allowance has been to allow a portion of the walkway to go through as long as it's not the area immediately in front of the door. That area we consistently have not allowed to be counted towards the private outdoor area. And the applicant's proposing, it's actually here, so it doesn't encompass the landing area. It's like, they indicate this is being the private outdoor area. But so my question relates to this common area.
Mr. Erdin, I remember the project. It wasn't too long ago that came through the staffing officer process, and on that, staff recommended that the 15 by we thought it was okay. Staff thought it was okay to allow the walkway to go into the 15 by 15, and you didn't agree with us, and so that one actually had a modification request
To allow it in the front
that allowed
yard.
to the front yard and or to allow the size to be not have the
minimum
dimensions not meet the minimum dimensions. So you had some leeway to grant that modification either way you wanted. So I would say that we still have the same. We have the same. I'm less familiar with this one. If it's at the same grade, so it's all sort of usable as one area, then we would say that it was okay, that it doesn't need a modification. I can't quite tell from this, and I'm not.
Do you know, Mr. Fisher?
Looks
Is this
like
a
there's
flat area? It says
All the area in front of the building is flat.
Well, this has a 4-foot plaster wall providing privacy and screening at the open space. So that's this thing. So it really is not one big. The intent of the 15 by 15 is a 225 square foot open area that is fully usable, and it's supposed to be one big area. So I would say that with this wall here, that would be contrary to the intent. So the only way that I would support this is if this wall were to be removed. And I believe this all looks like it's about the same grade. I mean, there's no step that seems to separate the two. So as long as it has the same grade and that wall was removed, my position is it would not need a modification.
Okay, and then either Ms. Lamazza or Mr. Cato, the provision of private outdoor living space where it says it needs to be accessible from the unit it serves. Like I said, you have that section. The private outdoor living space shall be contiguous to and accessible from the dwelling units for which it is provided. This is the private outdoor living space for Unit 1. And here's the front porch.
They're adding a step here into the yard area.
And we're-
alterations to the existing porch.
Okay. And that, okay, so that answers that question. Is Mr. Garcia coming back, or did he have to leave?
He had to leave.
Okay. Okay, in regards to the floor plan, Mr. Fisher, each Unit 3 has an entrance into the living area and entrance into the bedroom, so 2 separate entrances. And then for Unit 2, it has an entrance over here and an entrance into this bedroom with closed-off areas. Can you explain what the purpose is of the 2-door, why you need the 2 doors, and not just
The property owner is here. Perhaps he can address
Well,
the floor plan configuration.
Front and back door to the unit. I mean, that seems to be a totally normal, common circumstance to have a front and back door. I mean, just if for nothing else, fire safety and everything else, you would want to be able to get in and out.
Well, that's what the windows are for. The code requires one.
Yeah, but
either
what
a
the
window
code
or a door.
requires is different than making nice living space. Let me just step back here a little bit. We
Well, no, I'm
came
asking-
in with a modification
I'm asking a
request,
question.
and I know you're asking questions, but you seem to be looking to find ways that you believe the project doesn't comply with the zoning ordinance separate from the modification requests. And obviously, your plan checking process seems to be different from staff's and the applicant's. And maybe we need to, I don't know what to do about that circumstance when obviously there's no application for those additional modifications for the simple reason staff indicated they were not needed.
If the building was connected, they don't need, what is proposed here does not need that connection. But if they were connected, then it would.
But the
What I'm
connection
doing-
issue has been raised during
No,
this
no,
meeting
let
by
me-
a conversation that's not a party, by a person who's speaking who's not a party to this hearing.
No, Mr. Cato said it. I'm looking at the project, I do zoning.
I know you
I'm
do,
the
and
zoning.
I'm.
Okay, so I look, you're adding a
but you're-
unit. I'm looking at the open area. I'm looking at all the stuff to see if it's an appropriate improvement. What I'm trying to get to is making these findings, which you've asked me to do. Is the modification consistent with the purposes and intent of the ordinance, this should be necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on the lot? Okay, what's appropriate? What's the open area? What stuff is it providing? So it is all related to my decision. I'm not throwing in things trying to not approve it. I'm trying to look at this to see if there's some solutions and how we can get to a favorable outcome. I don't want to get argumentative. I'm trying to look at the different at this project and come up with some solution. And so these are questions I have zoning related on this property.
Mr. Reardon, if I
Okay,
could-
well, I've answered your question about the door. I don't know that.
One of the reasons that we were going to have that the door was going to be left there, it's already there.
Okay.
It's been there since the building was built in 1960. So at one point, this is going to be a laundry room. We were going to have it usable for all 3 units, this one little area here. That was my idea, was to have, because they don't have laundry facilities. So I was thinking that we could use that for all 3 units. That was my thinking. Now, the way it's set up right this second, that isn't exactly the way it's going, because it's going right into the unit.
Right.
But you're asking, there is a door there, it's been there for all these years.
Okay, and same with this door too? This has been there
Yes.
too? Okay.
Yes.
So those are both the 16 doors.
Mr. Reardon, I'm not sure, just in case you had a concern about the potential for illegal dwelling unit, I don't really see that potential because there's only one bathroom. And that would have to be, if you're thinking that maybe that door could be closed off and this could be used as an illegal dwelling unit or a 4th dwelling unit, I don't really see that possibility too much because there's only one bathroom for this whole thing.
All right, great, thank you.
I did have one comment about the density.
Okay.
The neighbors, and I take that very seriously, his letter, because it's important to me to understand where other people are coming from on this. My position on the density is completely the opposite on that. I believe, and I truly believe this, that if I use it as a commercial building, it could be almost anything. It could be a bar, a restaurant. I don't know if you've looked at the list. It could be a lot of different things. I could have a lot of traffic. I really won't. Let's get real on that. So, for that person to say that they're afraid of the traffic when there's only going to be 2 parking spots is a little bit ridiculous. When, as a matter of fact, I can also use the other side of the parking lot after 5, and I can actually have that become a mini laundromat. I mean, I could have that thing coming and going. I got people coming and going all day long. Mini storage. I mean, it could be a lot of different things. So, the least density that you could possibly have, and the least parking, is residential use. Absolutely, without question. As a matter of fact, they want me to have 12 parking spots to make that into commercial use. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. That's what the people on the building and safety are saying, that they want 12 parking spots for this to be commercial use. 12. I don't know if you're aware of that, but that's what I'm facing, is 12 parking spots, because it goes by the 200, every 200 square feet. So figure that out. That's a lot of parking I have to provide if it's commercial. Doesn't make any sense.
Mr.
Yes.
I just want to say that from a staff perspective, we don't have an issue with the density. We don't have a problem with 3 units on this lot. We in particular have a problem with this particular configuration of the unit proposed, not the density itself. So
I understand that, and that's a good point. Yeah. We agreed. I mean, they've proposed that it should be a 1-bedroom, which, in a 6-foot setback. The problem I have with that is it's going to cost so much money and get so little rent. It's not financially feasible. It's onerous to do that to this building. It just doesn't make sense. Nobody would do it. I'd be better off try to make it into a commercial again and make it all dense parking back there and have problems with the neighbors and all kinds of stuff. I mean, I'm faced with something that's completely not feasible. Not feasible to anyone, not just me. Even though I own the building, it's not feasible. I'd have to break through the concrete on 2 sides, eliminating at least a third of the residential use, and make it into a 1-bedroom. It just doesn't seem. It just seems like it would ruin the building. Personally, I mean, I'd hate to even watch that.
Okay.
Not to mention the cost. It would cost so much money. So we're kind of at an impasse. This project has been looked at by a couple of city council members. They're supporting it. That's why I'm going forward. They're supporting it. And they're going to support it. And one of them is a little bit irate. All I'm going to say is that we're going to go forward with this because I believe it's the only way to use the building. I'm adamant about it. I believe there's conflicting documents in the file. I'm willing to battle that in a courtroom. I've spent a lot of money on this thing. I'm going to continue. I'm spending every dime I've got on this. I'm not going to give up.
Okay.
And I've spent a lot of money trying to make it nice too, by the way. I've hired the best architects, the best of everything. It's cost a fortune. And this is as good as I can make it. And I'm improving everybody's life, not just one unit, excuse me. Not just one unit. It's everybody's life is going to be improved. So take that in consideration when you're looking at the project as a whole. It's not just the improvement of one building.
Okay. As this is proposed right now, I can't approve it because as proposed, it needs another modification, the distance between buildings. So,
well, let's say I asked for another modification. Then what would be your position? I guess that would be my next question.
I couldn't give you that direction right now.
You'd have to look at it again?
It'd be another public hearing before a public hearing. You need to notice it, get the public to come out, and then make a decision. I can't
But
tell
this is where we don't want to keep going around and around. You know that. Roxanne, we don't want
Right.
to keep spending a lot of money, your time and mine. I mean,
And
we
sir,
really need
excuse
to
me,
come to
wait.
some, okay.
You addressed me. This
We should have addressed that before we came here, but
Yeah, the building connection, it's not, and I need to see how it will relate, because this building's taller than this one, and how
a
exactly
little
it's going to be.
bit, a little bit taller.
Okay.
You're right on that. It's going to be a
So
slight.
how is that going to work in terms of connection? So as this is before me today, I can't approve it.
Gil Garcia, I don't know. I'm not an architect.
Yeah, so that's something you could work with
Ms. Reardon,
staff.
could you consider like letting them work on a roof connection that qualifies according to our standards that would go back to design review? They are not asking for a building separation. They don't want to demolish any of this building. So they do intend to connect the roofs to create a triplex.
I would like to relook at it. I want to see how the connection is and how it works.
Okay, because I was told that the connection as designed
Yeah,
does work, and that's why we didn't advertise an additional modification. It's a little unfair to the applicant now to make a call here that, oh, that isn't a roof connection.
Well, then I can just deny the project. In my opinion, this is not a roof connection, and this is, it's not even part of the roof. It's just it's an awning. It's just attached to the building. It's not even, here's the roof. It's not, that is not a roof connection.
Ms. Reardon, in order for there not to be a modification for building separation, they have to have a roof connection that meets the zoning ordinance. We know that it doesn't. You have opined that. I've done some checking and confirmed that. So that's something that will either be resolved or it'll have to come back for a building separation modification. And I would ask that you not focus on that. If there's something else going on, that would lead you to either continue or approve or deny the project. Why don't we figure that part out?
That's what I was getting at. This was the first part of it. That
because they can either design something that meets our ordinance or they can't. And if they can, then they can move forward. If they can't, they have to come back for a modification. So.
There's one last comment I'd like to make on the rear setback, and this is again strictly from my own opinion on it. It's a parking lot back there. It's been a parking lot for I think 33 years. It's always going to be a parking lot. There's an apartment building that it caters to. I don't see any plus side to having an open area back there. What would anybody use it for? To look at a parking lot? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to have. I can see it on the side, and that's why I did it on the side, was because there's a residential building right next to it. But to have an open area, when this is a parking lot, when this is a parking lot, to have this building and just, I guess, stick a bunch of trees or whatever you're going to do back there, you can't use it as open space. You wouldn't be sitting back there. Nobody would. There's going to have to be a fence here, obviously.
setbacks are required in all zones to provide separations between uses, and whether it's a parking lot or a building
I understand that, but what I'm saying is the reason that the reason I'm asking for the modification is not because I don't see I don't see it as a plus. I understand what you're saying. I understand the rule, but what I'm saying is I don't see a plus side to having that actually be a setback in a residential use, because it's facing a parking lot. If it wasn't, I might go along with that theory, but I just can't see it. Somebody brought up, well, it might not always be a parking lot. It won't? Well, what else is it going to be? It's R3 zone. Yeah, it's going to be a parking lot for as long as, it's been one. So to say that, my point is that you might as well just look at this as an area that's not usable.
Okay, well, I have concerns with the project, okay? One is the building separation. I don't believe that that's a connection. Two is the open area, the 15 by 15 area, and whether this really meets the intent of the ordinance of being common usable area when there's a main walkway running through this wall, which can easily be removed. I don't know how the walkway could be relocated because of this parking space. The appropriateness of private outdoor living space between parking spaces, I don't find that appropriate. And
That was going to be fenced off, you realize, right?
I do realize, but
So it's private.
Okay, yeah, and between the two parking spaces, and then the separation between the uses. The setback area, the purpose and intent is to provide this open area, light and air, separation between uses, and I don't feel that this is here. But that's it. And the comment that this is a mixed-use development and, it wouldn't require the setbacks is true when it's adjacent to another commercial zone, but when it's adjacent to a residential zone, you want some kind of separation between the two. And so there is a required for a 10-foot setback, and I don't feel that that meets the purposes and intent of the ordinance. In addition, taking the design, the compatibility criteria that the ABR, Architectural Board of Review, looked at, taking that into consideration, how, they've looked at it and they felt that they couldn't make the findings for the compatibility analysis. That's another justification, you say, regarding these findings, that it's necessary to secure appropriate improvement on a lot. The Design Review Board can't find that it is that they can make the compatibility considerations. I think that's another reason why you can't make the findings. I can't make the findings that it's consistent with the purpose and intent of the ordinance or necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on the lot. Therefore, I can't make the findings, and I do deny the project. And this action is appealable to the City Council within 10 calendar days. Sorry, not City Council, Planning Commission, within 10 calendar days. And that appeal is filed here at our planning counter versus City Hall. All the other design review boards and Planning Commission is filed at City Hall. And sometimes people get confused where to submit the appeal. So to the planning counter. Planning Commission also has oversight authority of all my actions here. And if they determine that this warrants additional discussion before them, the liaison, or actually the Planning Commission, has the authority to call this up, to suspend my action and call it up during that same 10-day review period. And if either of those were to occur, Ms. Malazzo would contact you, but I have a feeling that you guys will be appealing this.
We're definitely going to be appealing.
Could I ask for clarification? You are citing a section of the zoning ordinance or a code that talks about the adequacy of the connection between the buildings. Do you know what section you're referring to?
It's in the section that the staff has used is the section regarding accessory buildings, and it applies to attached versus detached accessory buildings. What staff is using that for is to make a determination for main buildings, which when you read the letter of the code, it does not pertain to main buildings. But since we don't have any provisions in the code regarding main buildings, they've used that.
Mr. Fisher, that's 2804010, the definition of accessory building.
Okay, so this is appealable, like I said.
So what you're wanting this to be is commercial, correct? I just want to get this on the record.
I've denied your project. Okay.
So you want it to be commercial?
No, I've denied your project. Thank you. The next item is 646 Sea Ranch Drive. Can they keep this? Do they want it? They can keep it?
I'd like it.
Oh, you need it? You don't have a copy? Okay.
If I sent that to you, so if Lori said that's not. I understand that. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Anything else for me?
No, I'll go through it. Good morning.
Good morning.
Do you need my plans, Pete? Do you want my plans, Peter, or do you have yours?
Oh, no plans.
Anytime you're ready.
Okay.
Would it be easier to use that one, or did you want to use? You can clip it on your shirt.
I'll just
You can
my sorry, what is that?
Okay.
Game show host invitation. So the project is located at 646 Sea Ranch Road Drive, and it's right next to Hope Ranch. And right now the site is developed with a single-family residence and attached garage. And the proposal is to add a 334 square foot accessory structure right here at the edge of the motor court, and also take care of a as-built 139 square foot accessory structure storage area in the back. The proposed accessory structure would have a half bath, and the permits being requested today are a coastal development permit due to location in the non-appealable coastal jurisdiction, and a modification for the proposed accessory structure being located in the remaining front yard area. I brought a photo here, and there we go. So we found the modification appropriate due to the fact that there are two front yards, and the main entrance area is on the west side here where the driveway comes in and the front door is, and the accessory structure will be located over here along the north side. And this is kind of a lower elevation than where a Sea Ranch wraps around the project site. So it essentially meets the intent of being behind the line of what would be the front entranceway of the development. And from a visibility standpoint, the residence would continue to be dominant over the accessory structure. So that concludes my remarks.
Great, thank you. If you'd like to state your name for the record and add any additional comments.
I'm Brian Pollard, the architect for the project. I think Peter has presented this just fine. I think everything that he's saying sounds good. I think that there's no other comments that I have unless there's any questions from you.
Okay, great, thank you. And I'd like to open the public hearing. Seeing no one in the audience, did we receive any letters? Oh, from Paula Westbury and expressing concerns on the project? Okay, so I'll close the public hearing. I went out to the site Monday and just happened to get there when the owners were there, and she was really nice. Showed me around the site and showed me the rear storage that they're using right now as the artist studio. It's
Right.
cute.
Yeah,
They
it's kind of
fixed
cute
it up.
where they painted it.
And I drove around the neighborhood to get the feel of, what the neighborhood's like, what different developments in the area, and to see if the modification and the location for the artist studio was the appropriate location on the site. Whenever it's in the front, whenever anything's in the front yard or the front setback, look at it a little more carefully, because that is, although it's private property, is part of the public viewscape. And I agree with staff that it's not visible from the public street with existing landscaping. And when you look at properties and with front yards and what we call properties with multiple street frontages, which in a sense this is, although it's the same street, you have a property line. If you pretended this was a rectangle, you have a property line here and here. And so we do have provisions in the code of primary front yards and secondary front yards. And as Mr. Lawson said, this would be determined to be your primary front yard in a typical setting, like a through lot, or even a corner lot. And other things can happen in your secondary front yard, like your provision of your 1,250 square foot open yard area. That can happen there. You still can't have artist studios, but I think that's another another area just to kind of take into consideration of whether it's appropriate to put the studio here versus there. And so I can support your modification request that it is in an area that kind of functions as your side yard. Although you come in and you do the garage this way, this is the front door, it's focused out towards this way. So, and in this case, the coastal issues, I think, are secondary. It's so far removed from the coast. And actually, I wanted to clarify, the staff report says it's in the non-appealable jurisdiction, but the, oh, here, it says right here, appealable, the map shows appealable coming swashed through this way and the non-appealable in this way. And the idea of the appealable and non-appealable zone, it's 300 feet from the beach. So that would go this way. In this instance, it's 50 feet from, I guess there must have been a historic water course in this area. And so, you know, the coastal issues that would generally pertain down near the coastline don't really pertain up here. So I think this project is consistent with our coastal policies. And if it was all non-appealable, you actually would probably be applying for a coastal exclusion, given the you know, distance from the coast. So. Make a long story short.
I like your explanation. Yeah.
Long story short, I can make the findings as outlined in the staff report. And I, regarding the modification and the coastal development permit, and I reviewed the conditions. I don't believe that I need to make any changes to the conditions. And I was talking about design review and construction hours, and they're all pretty standard. So I approve your project, subject to those conditions, and like you've sat through so patiently all the other ones, there's a 10-day appeal period. And also the Planning Commission has oversight over all my actions, and if they decide this warrants additional discussion before them, they could call it up during that same 10-day period.
Okay.
And if either of those instances were to occur, Mr. Lawson would contact you.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right, appreciate it. Thank
Thanks,
you.
sure. And now you adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Peter.